Welcome, faithful friends of Burlington Irish Heritage Festival, and new friends wherever you may be. This special event, Samhain in Vermont, is our gift to you as we move into the darker, colder days of fall and winter. Samhain is a festival that shares the same pre-Christian roots as Halloween. Like Halloween, it is a twilight time of mystery and magic and otherworldly connections with spirits, friendly spirits of loved ones who have gone before, or more mischievous ones who may come around our doors. Samhain is also a celebration of the harvest stored up to see us through the winter. Our state is blessed with many talented musicians and performers who have brought Irish tradition and culture to you through singing, dancing, poetry, and storytelling. For 25 years, they have helped us produce a festival to celebrate St. Patrick's Day. During these strange times, it seems fitting to bring you another festival, one that pushes back on the darkness and celebrates the glory of the harvest and the human spirit against the beautiful backdrop of Vermont colours. We are so grateful to Young Tradition Vermont, O'Hanley, and the Garrett School of Irish Dance for this journey back to an ancient tradition. So get cozy, settle in with your mug of hot cider, and let's go to the world of Samhain. The roots of Irish dancing go deeper than the beginnings of Christianity, and even further back than the advent of the Celts, all the way back, some say, to the Druids, who danced ritualistically to worship the sun and nature. The hornpipe is not quite that old, but it's one of the oldest existing forms of Irish dance, dating back to the 16th century and considered representative of rustic country life. Here we'll see a hornpipe danced in a setting that may be reminiscent of the landscape that inspired those Druids centuries ago. Although many contemporary hornpipes are danced at a slow tempo, the faster pace of this tune suits the more traditional steps danced here. Ireland is a place of myths, legends, and mysterious places that humans may only see at the time of death, or if transported there by otherworldly beings. Such a place is Avalon, an island shrouded in the mist of history since the 12th century. You've probably heard of Avalon as the final resting place of the Celtic King Arthur, but no one knows where Avalon was, and its suggested locations range from Greenland to Glastonbury to Ladies Island in Wexford County. Here is a song about Avalon that captures some of its wistfulness.
Avalon is the land where the women druids, the women bards, went to learn their trade, or maybe it was just to get away from the men. But this song by O'Hanley is about that island of Avalon and all its magical powers.
One of the unknowns of being out and about in the Irish countryside, especially around Samhain, is that you might be transported away to some mysterious place. Especially, hang on to your children and don't let them go anywhere near the fairies. Here is a beautiful poem by the Sligo poet W.B. Yeats.
W.B. Yeats. Where dips the rocky island of Sleuthwood in the lake, there lies a leafy island where flapping herons wake the drowsy water rats. There we've hid our fairy vats full of berries and of reddest stolen cherries. Come away, O human child, to the woods and waters wild, with a fairy hand in hand, for the world's more full of weeping than you can understand. Where the wave of moonlight glosses the dim gray sands with light, far off by furthest Rosses, we footed all the night. Weaving olden dances, mingling hands and mingling glances, till the moon has taken flight. To and fro we leap, and chase the frothy bubbles, while the world is full of troubles, and is anxious in its sleep. Come away, O human child, to the woods and waters wild, with a fairy hand in hand, for the world's more full of weeping than you can understand. Where the wandering water gushes from the hills above Glen Car, in pools among the rushes that scarce could bathe a star, we seek for slumbering trout, and whispering in their ears, we give them evil dreams, leading softly out from ferns that drop their tears of dew on the young streams. Come, O human child, to the woods and waters wild, with a fairy hand in hand, for the world's more full of weeping than you can understand. Away with us he's going, the solemn-eyed. He'll hear no more the lowing of the calves on the warm hillside, or the kettle on the hob sing peace unto his breast, or see the brown mice bob round and round the oatmeal chest. For he comes, the human child, to the woods and waters wild, with a fairy hand in hand, for the world's more full of weeping than he can understand.
Yeats doesn't tell us where the stolen child was taken by the fairies. Perhaps it was Tir na Og, across the western sea, the home of Celtic gods and the realm of eternal youth. Tirnanog is a beautiful island paradise of fertile hills and fields. Perhaps it looks a bit like Vermont in the fall. As we watch the Garrett dancers, we can imagine those mischievous fairies frolicking under a spectacular oak tree with crowns of autumn leaves. This light jig is a traditional soft shoe dance, known for its lively steps and quick pace. But not all otherworldly creatures are as sweet and graceful as the fairies. If you are making your way home alone on Halloween or on All Saints' Eve, and especially if you might be a little unsteady on your feet, you may have the bad fortune to be met by a puka, a strange and often hairy character who may just take you up on his back and run away with you. Let's hear about that, and be warned.
A puka is a magical creature in Celtic legend, and it often appears around Samhain when the veil between the worlds is thin. But a puka is a very special magical creature. It takes the form of a talking animal. Perhaps you know Harvey the Rabbit from the old James Stewart movie. But most usually it's a shaggy horse or a pony, and it talks to the people it runs into. And interestingly enough, the puka most frequently appears to men who are walking home from the pub late at night. And often it invites them for a ride, which is why they sometimes wake up somewhere else in the morning. This is the story of a puka who met a sailor, and we got this story from Yeats' Irish Folktale Collections.
Till dawn on All Saints' Day. With a way, hey, and a merry ho, hey. With a way, hey, and a merry ho, hey. You can drink till dawn on All Saints' Day.
As the moon was setting o'er the hills, I felt myself there's some pitch. I thought I'd walk that eagle way, and the sun came up on All Saints' Day. With a way, hey, and a merry ho, hey. So down along the road I stride, when this fine old mare came up beside. Did
hookah on All Saints Eve.
With a way, hey, and a merry ho, hey, let's memorize and then we say special treat for All Saints Eve. And the brass line too, and the rest of the bow, and a thing so sweet and low. With a way, hey, and a merry ho, hey. I played that tune sweet and low, and the dancing it got soft and smooth, and then they tumbled off to sleep. And I ran like no one else could see.
With a way, hey, and a merry ho, hey. With a way, hey, and a merry ho, hey. I ran like the devil on All Saints Eve.
Oh, Captain, sir, it's true, says I, yes, every word, I cannot lie. I beg you, sir, don't dock my pay for missing mass on All Saints' Day. With a way, hey, and a merry ho, hey. With a way, hey, and a merry ho, hey. That's why I'm late on All Saints' Day. With a way, hey, and a merry ho, hey. That's why I'm late on All Saints' Day.
But you don't have to go wandering the fields and lanes to encounter spooky characters. Sometimes they come knocking at your door.
The Horned Women. A rich woman sat up late one Halloween night, carding and preparing wool while all her family and servants were asleep. Suddenly a knock was given at the door, and a voice called, "Open, open!" "Who's there?" said the woman of the house. "I am the witch of the one horn," was answered. Mistress, supposing it must just be one of her neighbors who needed help, opened the door, and a woman entered, having in her hand a pair of wool carders, and bearing a horn on her forehead as if growing there. She sat down by the fire in silence and began to card the wool with violent haste. Suddenly she paused and said aloud, "Where are the women? They delay too long." Instantly a second knock came at the door, and a voice called as before, "Open, open!" The mistress felt herself obliged to rise and open the call, and immediately a second witch entered, having 2 horns on her forehead, and in her hand a wheel for spinning wool. "Give me a place," she said. "I am the witch of the 2 horns." And she began to spin as quick as lightning. And so the knocks went on, and the call was heard, and the witches entered, until at last 12 women sat around the fire, the first with 1 horn, and the last with 12 horns. As they carded the thread and turned their spinning wheels and wound and wove, they sang together an ancient rhyme, but did not speak a single word to the mistress of the house. They were strange to hear and frightful to look upon, these 12 women, with their horns and their wheels, and the mistress was scared nearly to death, but she tried to rise and call for help, and she could not move, and she couldn't utter a cry or a word, for the spell of the witches was upon her. Then one of them called to her, "Rise, woman, and go make us a cake." And the mistress searched for a vessel to bring water from the well so that she could mix it with the meal and make a cake, but she could find none. So the witches said to her, "Take a sieve and bring water in that." So she took the sieve and went to the well, but the water poured out of it, and she could fetch none for the cake. And she sat down by the well, and she wept. And a voice came from the well and said, "Take yellow clay and moss, and bind them together, and plaster the sieve so it will hold water." This she did, and the sieve held water for the cake. And this voice from the well said again, "Return, and when you come to the north corner of the house, cry aloud 3 times and say, "The mountain of the Fenian women and the sky over it is all on fire." And she did as she was told. And when the witches inside heard this call, a great and terrible cry broke from their lips, and they rushed forth with wild lamentations and shrieks, and they fled away to Slievenamon, which was their home. But the spirit of the well bade the mistress of the house to enter and prepare her home against the enchantments of the witches, who were sure to return again. So to break their spells, she sprinkled water in which she washed her children's feet, the feet water, outside the door of the threshold. Secondly, she took the cake which in her absence the witches had baked by mixing the meal with the blood they took from her family while they were sleeping. And she broke that cake in bits and placed it under the beds of each of the sleepers, and they were restored whole again. And she took the cloth they had woven and placed it half in and half out of a chest closed with a padlock. And lastly, she secured the door with a great crossbeam fastened in the jambs so that witches could not enter, and having done these things, she waited. Not long after, the witches came back, and they raged and called for vengeance. "Open, open," they screamed. "Open, feet water." "I cannot," said the feet water. "I'm scattered on the ground, and my path is down to the lake." "Open, open, wood and trees and beam," they cried to the door. "I cannot," said the door, "for the beam is fixed in the jambs, and I have no power to move." "Open, open, cake that we made and mingled with blood," they cried again. "I cannot," said the cake, "for I am broken and bruised, and I am beneath the sleeping children." Then the witches rushed through the air with great cries back to Slievenamon, uttering curses on the spirit of the well who had wished their ruin. But the woman in the house were left in peace, and a mantle dropped by one of the witches in her flight was kept hung up by the mistress in memory of that night, and was kept in my family from that generation to this for 500 years.
Irish reels have their origins in Scotland, and guess what? According to the Glasgow University Library, the very first mention of this dance was at a 16th century witchcraft trial, where the poor accused person is said to have danced one. I hope it helped to lift her spirits, as this next performance will surely do for us. Reels are now a staple of Irish dance and music, and this reel set includes some group choreography, as well as contemporary solo steps which allow dancers to show off their individual style. In the song you heard earlier, Cindy's horned women were whisked away to Slievenamon, a magical mountain in Tipperary, associated with the legendary hero and giant Finn McCool. The story goes that in order to decide on his bride, he set up a race for all his suitors to the top of the mountain. Since he had a favourite, he actually cheated and gave her a shortcut so she could win the race and her men. Now Finn was big, so big that he was able to straddle the top of the mountain. You can see evidence of how big he was in the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland, where the huge rocks were laid out as stepping stones so that he could walk over to Scotland without getting his feet wet. Here is a not-so-serious song that gives you an idea of just how big Finn McCool was.
There was this rather large fellow running around Ireland in antiquity, and he was reputed to be a very brave fellow, but the truth of the matter is, in the waning days, he was running away from this other big fellow, and if it wasn't for his wife, who was the brains behind the whole operation, he probably would have taken a nasty hit in the nose.
Finn McCool was a giant of a man. Before he walked to Scotland, he was halfway home again. When the morning sun was on his toes, the moon was in his eyes. Finn McCool was of enormous size. Early in the morning, Finn was breakfast in a pan. Half a side of bacon and a half a side of ham. 2 dozen eggs, potatoes, and a couple loaves of bread. Which I Finn over till he could be fed. One day he saw the landlord coming to collect. Why the crap will we do? They'll throw us in the ditch. Don't worry, said his missus, for I have got a plan. No scurvy Dublin agent will evict a mackerel plan. Wrap up in a sheet, pretend that you're a babe. One look at my baby, Finn will chase that man away. Just be quiet like a blubber, leave the rest to me. Oh, Creaky's here, I better put the water on for tea. Finn McCool was a giant of a man. Before he walked to Scotland, he was halfway home again. When the morning sun was on his toes, the moon was in his eyes. Finn McCool was of enormous size. The landlord knocked, the missus said, my man is not at home. It's just me and the baby, and we are quite alone. Let's sit a while and have some tea, but mind, don't make a fuss. This baby's cry will deafen you, and you should wake him up. The landlord slides the baby, then his eyes flew open wide. Oh, the saints preserve us, would you just look at size? Ah, yeah, said the missus, he is a sturdy lad. But if you think my baby's big, you ought to see his dad. Well, the landlord started running, and he ain't been hurt since. Then they got this missus, and they both began to dance. They danced the way to Scotland, halfway home again. Finn McCool was a giant of a man. Finn McCool was a giant of a man. Before he walked to Scotland, he was halfway home again. When the morning sun was on his toes, the moon was in his eyes. Finn McCool was big. That man was big. And his wife was very smart.
All these tales of fairies, witches, and giants would make you want to lock your doors, put the kettle on the stove, and hunker down around the fireplace. You can imagine all the stories and songs that were shared in kitchens down through the centuries. Another way they whiled away those long, dark evenings was with dancing. There wasn't much room on the kitchen floor, so people had to devise a way of dancing without taking up much space. Maggie Pickens, also known as Maggie Picky, is a traditional dance that evolved from this necessity. It's an old-style set dance performed to the tune of the same name. There are at least 27 known steps to accompany this set, but here the dancers have selected 6. Since these dances were performed in social gatherings and musical sessions, the percussion of the feet should complement rather than overpower the music. domestic life wasn't all good cheer and social gatherings. What about the cruel mother who locked up her poor daughter because she believed she was cursed? Luckily, poor Deirdre of the Sorrows did manage to find a lover and escape her imprisonment.
Well, now here's a tale, Deirdre of the Sorrows. It's a very long, long tale. And it's all about this beautiful woman who was born and lives with her mother. The mother was told that she was accursed, so she hid poor Deirdre away. She was discovered and ran away with her lover Nisha, while the king pursued him. And anyway, we've taken this long, long, long tale, and we've put it into 3 verses with a jig for those who want to dance in the middle. 1, 2, 3.
Deirdre, Deirdre, lovely Deirdre, where have you gone? Deirdre, Deirdre, beautiful Deirdre, lovely as more than Ireland. Born in the poppy, hidden away in West Destiny, people will. King Connacher is seeking you out, your hand would be the will. The hornets bite you under the bray, you stole my heart, oh ah. Deirdre, Deirdre, cursed bait, I love you from afar. Deirdre, Deirdre, lovely Deirdre, where have you gone? Deirdre, Deirdre, beautiful Deirdre, loveliest woman in Ireland. King Connacher is charmed with you, he'll take you for a drive. But grant your graces for a year to you are by his side. But a king's consort shall ne'er be, nor in my lord and lie. Whose niece shall love the warrior bold and a wandering bard is high. Deirdre, Deirdre, lovely Deirdre, where have you gone? Deirdre, Deirdre, fled with Nisha o'er the sea of Scotland.
So, did you take Tom up on his invitation to do a little jig in the middle of that song? Well, of course, that may not be so easy when you're sitting at a computer. So why don't you just sit back and enjoy watching someone else do it? This hop jig is a lovely light percussive dance performed by a single dancer in a traditional style. The steps come from Aoife Nivreen, a great dancer out of Limerick. Domestic horror stories were sung or told long before Stephen King came along. The Irish are masters of the most eloquent curse songs, and one of the most spine-tingling that we'll share with you now is about a young wife who is more than fed up with her husband. Luckily, for those with a squeamish disposition, the words are all in Irish, so if you really want to know, you'll have to contact O'Hanley. You'll find them in the credits at the end of this program.
Becca's going to sing us a beautiful song now in Gaelic. This is an old classic Irish song called An Hanna Dócha. And the words are actually a little creepy because it's in the old satirical style or almost a cursing style of song. So we won't tell you the grim lyrics, but it does have a lovely sound.
But all good festivals, even the spooky ones, should end on a joyous note, and Samhain is no exception. This a cappella treble reel is a feisty, in-your-face assertion of life, performed as a duet in real time. With no need for musicians or amplification, the feet are the star of the show, and as the two dancers stamp out their percussive rhythm, you can imagine all those powers of darkness being pushed back, north, south, east, and west, on a beautiful, breezy Vermont day.
Let's dance. 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah.
Well, we hope our Samhain celebration has lifted your spirits as we move into the fall and winter. If you have enjoyed it, I'm sure our performers would love an acknowledgement from you. In the following credits, you can find the contact information for O'Hanley, the Garrett School of Irish Dance, and Fern O'Donnell, our talented young fiddler from Young Tradition, Vermont. So for now, the Burlington Irish Heritage Festival bids you farewell, wishing you health and happiness with this old Irish blessing. Let your heart be glad for the harvest done, and may your winter be warm the whole season long. Thank you for watching.
And that's all I've got for you today. Thank you.